Hello, John Williams. How are you? Tax economist on X. Did you see what happened today in the Oval?
I did. Yeah, good to see you, Hugh, and congrats on the afternoon show here. Very
Oh my
exciting.
gosh.
Great.
Greatest thing in the world. I'm not going to ask you to do foreign affairs. I just want the audience to know this isn't pre-recorded. John and I set this up. Jonathan Williams knows more about taxes than I ever will. We set this up a long time ago because I want to know about extending the tax cuts and what's going on in reconciliation. And I'm going to talk with Charles C.W. Cook after the break about Ukraine. I'm going to talk with Ben Domich about Ukraine after the break. But I got to get to the bottom of this. And Jonathan is a guy I trust. So, Jonathan, what are you telling your members at ALEC about what the House passed and what the Senate is considering right now?
Well, I'll tell you what, Hugh, as you know well, ALEC has been very involved with our legislators over the course of the last several years, and even going back to 2017 for the original Trump tax cuts, the TCJA, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, as being something that put America's economy on rocket fuel and really took us to the next level and brought all those jobs back, brought that capital back to the United States for repatriation. And it's something that is essential right now, where it's not just, some people around this town in D.C. are talking about the politics of it. And that's obviously very important for the president, for Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune. But even more importantly is the economics of it, Hugh. And that if this doesn't get renewed and very quickly, this puts such a cloud over uncertainty of what's happening with the economy. We would be facing a multi-trillion-dollar tax increase. And so I think what Speaker Johnson did was just incredible to get that with such a narrow margin coming out of the United States House. To get that budget resolution done. There's obviously things that maybe even you and I would like to see better from a fiscal perspective. But you know what? They got the vehicle done, and now they're setting up the stage for what this essential battle is going to be to preserve those Trump tax cuts. And heck, maybe even go a little bit further and get that business tax rate down to 15% like the president has been talking about.
Jonathan, the only thing that I could see the Senate doing, other than time stamping their approval of the budget resolution from the House, is finding some more cuts so that the House could say, oh, yeah, we can do that. For example, notwithstanding any other law or regulation, specifically the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978, the federal government workforce shall be decreased not less than 25%, not more than 50%. And whomever the president designates to do that, we're going to do that within this fiscal year in order to free up more money. Something like that. Another cut that would give the House more opportunity in Ways and Means. But I really don't know why this is going to take longer than a couple of days, maybe a week, for the Senate to approve, because we got a one-vote margin, Jonathan. There's not like a lot of margin here for them to screw around.
There is not. And, we're thankful that at ALEC we have nearly 100 members of this current Congress who are ALEC alumni members from when they served in their time in their state legislatures. So that's why I think we're very optimistic. Speaker Johnson is one of them. Leader Scalise is one of them. And so I think the voice of the states right now, we have an ALEC letter that more than 400 state legislators have signed to say permanently extend these tax cuts for the future of our economic growth as a country. And I think the Senate has got a little bit more of a cushion, as you mentioned there, Hugh. They're probably even stronger on a few of the policy topics, something that you and I have talked about a ton, that we at ALEC have talked about, and that is the whole issue of the state and local tax deduction, SALT deduction, that was a huge pay for in the original bill that probably gave us that alternative minimum tax nearly repealed because of that. And looking forward, that's a big contention point with the New York delegation right now on the House side. I think the Senate could bring a little bit more common sense to that topic and actually get us something that will not bust the budget as part of this tax deal as well. But to your point, Hugh, the issue of budget neutrality is so important that we don't have to offset dollar for dollar on the tax side when we can find spending reductions, as you pointed towards. That's the key at the state level, where at the end of the day, 49 out of the 50 states have a balanced budget amendment. They have to do it every single year, Hugh.
So Jonathan, what is your advice? Members of the Senate listen to this program. Of course, state legislators listen across the United States. What's your advice to your Senate friends? 'Cause I got a lot of friends in the Senate, and they tell me the Byrd rule is complicated, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I understand that. We just need to get it done because we're like a heart attack away from losing the majority.
Well, and just even watching the equities markets in the last couple of days, I mean, we're teetering on, potentially some very bad things economically with inflation, being still persistent with our national debt the way that it is. We need strong growth. I mean, this whole idea that some of the bean counters here in Washington say that we're not even going to hit 2% GDP growth over the long term, we need to take that model and throw it to the side and say we're going to demand 3% GDP growth, at least in this country. And how do you do that? Is you have pro-growth policies, deregulation, like we're going to see with the Trump administration 2.0. But the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is absolutely necessary if we're going to have a shot at getting out of this hole that we have with the national debt.
So the 400 legislators, and by the way, if you're a legislator and you don't belong to ALEC, you're a dummy. Go join the American Legislative Exchange Council, alec.org. But Jonathan, those 400 members, did they take a position on what the Senate should do, or is it just extend the Trump tax cuts?
Well, I think most when I talk to our legislators, they say, extend the Trump tax cuts and also get as much as more as you can, right? I mean, we had constraints back in 2017 as well when we were looking at that. And the conference report came back and there were compromises at the end, like there always are in these kind of major legislative packages. But I think as we talk to our members, they'd like us to see us go further to get down to maybe 15% on the business tax rate and continue to drive growth economically in the United States. But when you combine that with the deregulatory efforts and so many other things being proposed with Doge and just this kind of new sense of optimism in Washington around fiscal responsibility again and budget cuts, and how do we tackle this debt? Growth is always going to be a key element, and that's what we hear from our legislators every day.
Growth is what makes the rich state rich. And if you haven't gotten Rich State, Poor State yet, that's ALEC's premier publication. They do a lot of great stuff. They have a school choice book as well. Head over to alec.org, ALEC.org. You're going to be hearing about the state of the states throughout the year because we're just going to make it a priority that you know what's going on, whether it's school choice in Tennessee or a flat tax in Arizona, wherever it is, wherever there's innovation. We're going to bring Jonathan and other people from ALEC on to talk about it. Jonathan Williams, thank you. Follow him at Tax Economist. Jonathan, we got to worry about that name. I'm not sure a lot of people are going to rush to you'll like Tax Economist on X. You really will. Jonathan gives you good stuff. Go follow him at Tax Economist on X. Thank you, Jonathan.